Welcome back, HC Nation. Hey, Zach Edwards here with another Adventure Box podcast. This is really fun. We're going to be talking about the Navy in the Atlantic Ocean for the World War of 1812. Now, we already talked about it. I talk about it every time when we talk about the War of 1812. It's not much talked about. It was also not a very popular war. The people did not want to go into war with Britain, but we did. Now, how in the world, let me ask you this question. How in the world do you go into a fight with against a, let's just say, if you're not a trained soldier, a trained soldier? How do you go against a trained army if you're just a ragtag set of people? Now, in the American Revolution, that's exactly what we did, and we proved that we could actually fight. The problem is, 1812, when we declared war, we were not ready. We declared war on them instead of the opposite way around. We declared war. Actually, I think American Revolution, I guess we did declare war as well. And were we unprepared? Yes, we were, but there were certain reasons why we had to do it. We were almost forced into it. War of 1812, forced into it? No, not exactly, but yes, we mentioned why it was so important. We talked about the four things that were so important. Impressment, they were stealing, kidnapping our people. Native American support, we were moving west. The British were providing them with arms and help to fight back. The British forts that were there as well. A lot of other things. So these were some of the things that it forced us into going to World War II. But one of the biggest things, and I mean huge, this is extremely big compared to, or when considering why we should not have gone into the War of 1812. And that is the Navy. That's right. What Navy? The United States? Navy? Not really. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be talking about, it's funny. In my notes, it actually says, okay, today we raise anchors and set sail into the early Navy battles of the War of 1812. Yeah, I don't want to start it off that way. I wanted to do it differently. No, I mean, when you're writing it down, it sounds good, but seriously, we're raising anchor and we're setting sail into the Navy battles of War of 1812. Now, this was a conflict, forgetting that tagline, this was a conflict that often it's remembered for its land campaigns, burning of DC, the attack on New Orleans. Now, a lot of these things are well known. This is like the major things that people talk about. The biggest thing, the biggest battles were actually on the water. The state of the U.S. Army, these are the two things that we're going to go over today. The state of the U.S. Army, U.S. Navy, and at the outbreak of the war, and how basically we faced off against the world's greatest naval force with very little. The second thing we're going to be talking about is the unexpected heroes of the sea. That's right, the American privateers, not pirateers, privateers, but they are the pirates. These were civilian sailors who brought the war to the British doorsteps. Yeah, that's right. They brought it to the British. They did it through cunning. They did it through courage. And also their raids. Yes, they loved to raid other ships. They were given acceptance by the U.S. government to be our privateers. Now, the British had privateers during all different parts of time. The French did, the Spanish did. Everyone had privateers, which would be ships that could actually attack other ships from other countries and take their goods. This is when they were called privateers, because they were under contract with a nation to be able to do it. Well, okay, we're going to go more into that when we get there. But this was so great. It was cannon fire. It was chases. It was ghost ships. All these different things made up our naval battles. Ships stalking merchant vessels. This is basically why we had to create this young Navy force in the U.S. And private citizens that didn't want to be in the government and did not want to be employed by the government became our privateers, contracted with us to set sail and attack other ships from other countries. Now, during times of treaty, you weren't allowed to do that. The privateers became pirates. Why? Because they were not allowed by the government to attack. But all of a sudden, you have two governments in a war those privateers are released and said, go for it. Have fun. Take as much booty as you can. Now, we don't think of it as the same kind of pirates. Well, no. In 1812, these were the same type of pirates. Blackbeard type of pirates, though he was dead at this time. But those type of pirates. But sanctioned by the government. So let's talk about this David and Goliath kind of scenario. This is, again, on the sea. When the United States declared their battle against Great Britain in June of 1812... sorry, I got a text and my eyes got drawn to it. When they declared war on Great Britain in 1812, it was picking a fight against the naval superpower of the world, the whole world. The Royal Navy boasted of over 600 warships, dozens of seasoned admirals, and centuries of naval dominance. Now, here's the one thing. Well, okay, let me go through the U.S. and then I'll tell you about the one thing that really sets it apart and the reason why they could actually attack at this point. The U.S. Navy, it had 16 ships, and 7 of which were frigates, which were not for attack. Or they were ships, that were not available to battle. What the Americans lacked in numbers, though, it made up for in ship design, let's just say. The American vessels were faster. They were heavily armed. And they were also well built. The British were not all that way. And a lot of those ships for the British were old. The commanders of the U.S. Navy, they were young, they were ambitious, they were very well trained during the Revolution and the quasi-war with France. Okay, so there was another war that I did not think of. The quasi-war with France. But put that aside. So they're not in quantity, not many ships, but they had the right type of people and the right type of ships in the fight. So, and they also had the fighting spirit. The fighting spirit is basically, they knew they had a lot to lose in the United States. So those commanding officers knew that they could not give up. They had to attack. They had to be part of it. So, despite the odds, the U.S. Navy scored surprisingly many victories. Early victories. And how could they? Now, this is the part I was going to tell you. How could they go up against 600 ships? It's because they didn't have to go against 600 ships. Who was battling Britain at the same time that the U.S. was going against Britain as well? Let me think. France was. That's right. And France had a lot of ships. The U.S. did not have a lot of ships. So what did the British think? Well, they only have a few ships. Let's just send over a few ships to take them on. Well, that was a little bit of their downfall. Let's go through a few of them. Okay, first, August of 1812. Now, we talked about on Monday, we talked about Lake Erie, how we had to build a brand new fleet of ships, 9 ships to take on the British, 6 ships, but well established, already established, and we had to do it in less than 8 months. Okay. Now, before that, on the Atlantic, August of 1812, we had the USS Constitution versus the HMS Guerrier. I don't know. The Constitution was nicknamed the Old Ironside, and it faced off on a British frigate, Guerrier. I don't know its name. I'm sorry. I'm horrible at that, at reading some of these names. But the Ironside was because we started putting metal on the outside of our vessels. The old Ironside was actually provided by, the metal for it was actually provided by Paul Revere's copper factory, copper company. You can read about that in the textbook. Okay. In a fierce engagement, the USS Constitution fired their heavy guns and because of their durable hulls, they could ward off the British fight. The cannonballs that were hitting their ships were basically bouncing off because the metal that was on the outside. If it was just wood, the balls would go right through. As you see from like every pirate or naval movie out there, Every time a cannon hits a ship on the side of the ship walls, it goes right through it. Hit the metal, it might ding the metal. They're pretty thick, the metal that's on it, and it will bounce back and fall into the water. It saved these ships. The USS ships were better prepared for battle than the wooden ships that the British were sending over. And they did not send over their best. They sent over some of their, the ones that they thought they needed in order to stop the Americans. It was a morale boost for the Americans. Remember, they had just lost the Canadian land battles. They hadn't had Lake Erie yet. So because of this, because of the great increase in morale, the Navy, the U.S. Navy, began to get stronger. They got more recruits. They were pumping out ships at this time. Next, USS United States. This was October 1812. This was captained by Stephen Decatur. I'm sorry. Captain Stephen Decatur led the U.S. ships for the United States to another victory. It was the USS United States versus the HMS Macedonia. The Macedonian, sorry. HMS Macedonian. October 1812. It was another victory for the United States. It actually captured the frigate this time, the British frigate, and sailed it back to the Americans, to the United States, as a prize. But not also a prize, but to retrofit it for our own use. So now we're stealing British ships and putting them into our fleet with a few modifications. Next one, also in October 1812, another battle between the USS Wasp versus the HMS Frolic. Frolic? Really? Okay, I can get wasps. Sting you. Fast, sting you. That's it. Frolic. I'm gonna frolic in the flowers. Seriously? Okay. I don't know why they name these things the way that they named them, but hey, you know what? Go for it. The American sloop, which was the Wasp, fast, small, really got in there, against the British Frolic in the Atlantic. Both ships were damaged. The Frolic was not the only one that was damaged. The Wasp was also damaged, but the Wasp was able to capture the Frolic, only to be capturing itself hours later. Oh, sorry, no, I think it was the Wasp. Yeah, captured the Frolic, only to be captured itself, the Wasp, hours later by the British ships of the line. So this is funny because the Wasp goes in, takes over the Frolic. Well, funny enough, then the British ships come in and take back the Wasp. Now this is a sloop, which is a small vessel, heavily armed, but small vessel, so it didn't lose much. These weren't just tactical wins for the U.S. Again, the Wasp won the first one, so there's some good news. It lost, it got captured hours later. So yeah, they basically proved that America could stand toe to toe with the British on the waters, and at least ship for ship. Now here's the problem. What happens when there's not just one ship? Yeah, that's a big problem for the U.S. Okay, so the British quickly realized that while the American ships were effective in single combat, the way to win was through blockades and attrition. So by the 1812s and into the 1813, the Royal Navy basically began to bring out groups of ships. One ship against a group of ships did not work. The Royal Navy began to choke off the U.S. coastline, cut off trade completely. Now, we had an embargo for a while, but we could actually ship to other countries. Not at this point. We were done. We could not do anything. So ports like Boston, New York, Charleston, and Chesapeake Bay, our largest ports, were completely sealed off. American naval activity severely limited. But this is where our secret weapon comes in. The privateers, the pirates. Yes, arr! We're gonna come in and beat the British. Okay, now remember the British used to fight with pirates of their own. Now these are privateers, they're not pirates. The privateers of the past became pirates when we had a treaty with another country. But we have no treaty with the British, so the privateers come in. They were actually normal, not like Blackbeard, not grungy, and they were very heavily well armed, but not dirty, grungy type of pirates. These were private companies that would allow their ships to go after other ships to steal their goods and to help in the war. Privateers, again, were not pirates. I want to make sure that this is understood. But to the British, the difference may seem fairly small. The privateer, again, was a private-owned ship, authorized by the U.S. government with a letter of marque. So this basically allowed them to attack enemy ships, especially merchant vessels. Now their goal was, one, to disrupt British trade. Yes, they went after the British merchant ships. Just like the British went after the U.S. merchant ships. They captured valuable cargo and took over the ships of the British. And in the process, they profited heavily. They profited from the spoils. The privateers weren't part of the Navy, but they were in its essence they were an essential part of the American maritime struggle and the strategy. So, how did they help in the war effort? This is the part I love. Okay, by the end of the war, over 500 American privateers had set sail from U.S. ports. 600 British ships, 16 U.S. Navy ships, 500 American privateers. Now, but get this, this is the greatest part of it. Out of those 500 American privateers, they captured or sank more than 1,300 British merchant ships. Holy cow! For every one that went out, they had nearly 3 that they took down or captured, growing their ships. That's right, their fleet expanded. All those privateers, all those private companies that took over those British ships now were able to bring them home and turn them into merchant ships. Because what was the British doing? The British were stopping the merchant ships. They were destroying the American merchant ships. Before that, remember, they were boarding them and taking captives. The British, somebody that has British citizenship and somewhere in their line, which a lot of them did, because a lot of them came from Britain, which is why they impressed a good amount of sailors. Okay, privateers were essential with also were also very active out of Baltimore, New York, Salem and Boston, and Charleston. Now this is interesting because remember, the British, when they took over, which places did they took over? They took over, let's see, Boston. Boston was one of the privateers ports. New York, privateers ports. Charleston, privateers ports. Wow. So how in the world did they get their ships out? Well, a lot of their ships were already out. They were out in the open ocean because they were merchant ships, just heavily armed merchant ships. So ships like the Rose, the Yankee, the Prince de Neufchâtel, Neufchâtel? I don't know. Became legendary. So legendary, I don't know their names. But captured dozens of ships each, just those 3. So it wasn't for every privateer ship you got 3. It was, most of them were maybe not as effective as some of them who took over like a dozen each. Now, the effect of the British commerce. Let's go over that. So we talked about the privateers. The privateers may not have faced off with the Royal Navy head on. but they did basically what mattered most, and that was the British wallet. That's right. The British wallet is attacked, the economy goes down. The merchant ships are attacked, the economy goes down. Economy goes down, the British has no money to, 1, pay for its sailors, 2, pay for its soldiers, 3, pay for its ships, and the maintenance. But here's interesting. Here's some of the things that happen because of this. Okay. If all of a sudden you drive a car and you get in a car accident, and then you drive another car and it gets in an accident, how much do you have to pay for insurance? It continues to skyrocket, right? Because of your bad driving. What happens if a privateer takes over a British ship and then another privateer takes over another ship? Insurance rates increase dramatically for the British merchant ships. It skyrockets. If it skyrockets, what happens? They have to pay more. What happens if they have to pay more? They have to charge more on shipments. What happens if they have to charge more on shipments? The British take less money in. London merchants demanded better naval protection. 600 British ships going after the French could not be sent over to the US because the American privateers. So they wanted protection. They got it. This basically stretched out the British resources till they had none. The American privateers forced the British to guard every shipping lane and also guard every ship that was going out. This added pressure on the British. So, very smart. They could not all attack the United States at the same time. One British official admitted, and this is what they said, this is an exact quote, the predations committed, predations committed by the American privateers are beyond all conception. It was so bad they couldn't conceive it, how bad it was. Okay, so let's talk about the dangers. Okay, one last thing. For the privateers, how dangerous was it? Privateering was not for the faint of heart. Crews were not trained in Navy professional aspects. They were not ready. They were not built or trained to go into war or to attack other ships. Ships were often smaller and lighter armed. They did not have all the protection that the American ships had. And the last one, battles were close, brutal, and personal. You boarded at them. You used cutlasses. You used hand-to-hand combat. Yet the privateers, what did they get from it? They got fame. They got fortune. All that valuable cargo they had to ship back to the United States. And for many, a sense of patriotism, patriotic purpose. It blurred the lines between commerce and combat, showing how ordinary Americans could strike at the heart of the world's greatest empire from the deck of a fast, durable schooner, if nothing else. A small vessel, a fast vessel. These were some of the issues that happened to privateers and also the benefits that came from it. So let me recap really fast what we talked about today. The naval warfare in the War of 1812 was not just about the mightiest ships or the largest numbers or even open sea duels. It was about improvising. It was about resilience, being able to endure the attacks, the constant attacks, and ingenuity, creativity. You had that, you were able to figure out the best strategies to win a war. The U.S. Navy, though small, landed blows at the very beginning, which basically shocked Britain. Again, Britain was going against France at the time. They could only send over a certain amount of ships. All of a sudden, the privateers come on. The British had to respond to the U.S. Navy by blockading them, sending groups of ships over and sitting outside the ports so no one could come in and go out. And this basically put pressure on the privateers, the private citizens who owned shipping vessels who couldn't go into their own ports. So they went out and attacked the British ships, the merchant ships. Basically, as they call it, tit for tat. You attack mine, I'm going to attack yours. That's what happened. The War of 1812 may have begun with chaos on land in Canada, but by sea, it quickly became a story of defiance, daring, and disruption. And that's how they were able to win. But wait, next week we're going to talk about their losses. Major losses. Before we go there, though, what would you have rather served on in the War of 1812? Let's go with either one, American or British. Okay, what would you rather have served on? A Navy frigate or a privateer schooner? Do you want to be on the British side or would you want to be on the American side? Put them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Let us know these things. We want to know. That or email me, zach@historicalconquest.com. Let me know. And we will talk about it in the next episode if we get them fast enough. If not, that's okay. But love to hear what you have to think about this. Wait till next week because we're going to talk about the attack on where? Where was the biggest attack? Washington, D.C. So, until then, thanks so much for joining us, and we will catch you next time. Take care, everyone. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.